So welcome back to this channel IBM classes. I'm creating a video today on interview questions of DB2. So here I'll be covering five interesting questions in DB2. So I'll be starting that presentation. So this is presented by IBM classes. So the question one is brief about triggers, purpose of triggers, where we use the triggers concept in real time. So the uh, triggers in IBM actually. So these are actually either a set of actions which you are gonna perform, or a written set of program which is of start PGM objects in IBM. So triggers are basically um, you can say will be executed automatically when there is any change operation performed or specified on a table or a view LF or a view overview. So it runs automatically, so you don't need to give a call command for this to run. So yeah, just once a change operation, either insert, delete, or update, perform on a table, that trigger will automatically call the program associated with the trigger. So triggers are a good functionality in DB2. So uh, let's move on. So the second thing is the change operation in database. So what are those change operations that I already talked about, which are SQL insert, update, or delete. Now here you can see that I didn't mention one thing, the read operation. Why? I'll be telling you later. So change operation means insert, update, or delete. So here are two types of triggers actually. So one is SQL, or the other one is the external triggers. So the triggers which are created using the create trigger command, where we specify the before, after, or the name of the program which is gonna called, or event insert, update, or delete. So SQL triggers are created using the command, the SQL command, which is create trigger statement. So we can define a SQL trigger using create trigger command, and as external triggers are basically um, defined using the add pftrg command on a pf, that is a table. So now, which I mentioned earlier, if I go back one slide, change operation, which is SQL insert, update, or delete. So here comes the scene where SQL triggers will only work on insert, update, or delete triggers. So these can be insert, update, or delete triggers only. So SQL triggers are only insert, update, or delete triggers. But external triggers which are created are using the add pftrg command, where you also mention the events or the timing before or after, and the program that should be called. So here you can specify or define insert, update, delete, or read triggers as well. So whenever you access a record in database file, your read trigger will be called automatically each and every time. So for every record that read triggers executed, so whatever you mentioned or whatever program you're calling, that will be executed. Now the third thing is SQL triggers can be defined for table or view, but external triggers which are defined using add pftrg command can only be defined for table only, means pf only. So because we can see that we are using add pftrg, not add lftrg command. So pf denotes the physical file, so it only applies on the table or pf, not on the view or lf, right? So this is the main difference between the SQL triggers and the external triggers. So SQL triggers are those triggers which are created using the create trigger command, and they are basically written fully or entirely in the SQL script or in the SQL tables with itself, but they can be specified on a PF separately by using the add PFTRG command in IBM IS400 system. Now this is the difference. Now just come further. So here we can specify 300 triggers, or we can define a 300 triggers on a single table or view. This is the maximum limit for a single table or a view. That you should know. Now, change operation. So whenever any change operation initiated on a table means insert, update, or delete, which is SQL insert, update, or delete. So then then that calls the trigger program, which is associated with the trigger operation. So each and every time a change operation initiated, it will automatically call the trigger program. So we cannot stop that. Now SQL slash external trigger. So these both can be applied on a same table. Means either on a PF, either on a table, they can be applied. But SQL triggers can only applied on uh, can be applied on view as well. Sorry. So now SQL triggers more than one events in SQL trigger program. So on a single trigger program, so we can specify this more than one trigger in a single trigger program, or even in external triggers as well. You can specify more than one trigger. Now for external trigger, add a read trigger. That is already mentioned earlier in my one of my slide, that we can add the read trigger on the external triggers. Now types of triggers on a table. So these depends upon the timings, means before or after. So they can be before delete trigger, before insert trigger, before update trigger. So before doing any changes or before performing any changes. Changes means insert, update, or delete on a table. You would be calling the trigger program. So here you would be using this to validate something or some inputs on your table first. So if you suppose you just want that you want to check that whether that record is changed or not, so you can specify those things, that whenever the record or a particular column value changes, then only the table got updated. After that only the table got updated. Or there would be some possible ways, like you can always update a table, these update, insert, or delete a table. Now after delete trigger, after insert trigger, after update trigger, so in this case the change operation, which is SQL insert, update, or delete, is performed before the trigger program or trigger operation happened on the file. So once the insert, delete, or update happened on the file, the trigger programs got executed after that. Read only triggers are basically um, used with external triggers. So whenever we are reading a file, so we are accessing a particular record. Suppose we are accessing all the records, so at every record the external trigger gets trigger, read only trigger gets trigger. Now why we use these triggers basically. So there are various real-time examples, so you can see where we use triggers. Suppose for example I'm populating a table from somewhere, from UI or from somewhere on my IBM system, and I just want that based on that table, one of my table which users don't have any idea should got updated, or should got locked, or should got inserted, deleted, or whatever you just want to perform with your trigger. So in that scenario you can use the trigger. So you just inserted one record in a table, and based on that you have created a trigger program and you just associate it uh, with some particular like insert, update, or delete, whatever trigger with your file, and you just trigger that program. So whenever that suppose record insert into the file, then a program goes trigger, and that program will insert the records in other files as well. So for example, you just want the to log the historical data. For example, you have deleted a record, so you just want to record that historical data, right? So before deleting that record, so before delete, trigger will be used in that case, and you just store that data that this record will be deleted from this file, and you are just maintaining a record of that data which is deleted from a particular file in your history file. So now you are maintaining the log that why that record deleted, or some other additional things that you can store. So this basically depends upon you. So other thing is which is very important here is maintain referential integrity. This is the first point, but I am explaining it on the in the last, because that's very important thing. So it should not be explained in a hurry. So for example, we have different tables in our system, and we define some referential integrities between more than one table, right? And for example, there is a table 1 and table 2, and between that there is a referential integrity, means a foreign key or primary key relationship exists between those tables. Now in that case, for example, you have inserted a record in one of your table, and you just want that the referential integrity must be maintained. Referential integrity must be maintained. So you don't want that you can say zombie record would left, or that there would be a record inserted into the referential integrity file, to which a referential integrity was there with the main parent file, or you can say a child file. So a record gets inserted to the child file whenever a primary key got created in a primary key got created in a file. For example, primary key 1 created in a file, and that primary key refers as a foreign key in other files. So a record must exist there with a foreign key 1 there, so that a referential integrity would be maintained, means the data would be consistent always. So in this case, you must use the trigger. So whenever you use the trigger, so that those trigger programs will insert the data in the referential integrity table. So integrity those tables, child tables, and that would be maintaining the referential integrity of the database system. So I think that's all for the trigger. So this is just a theory which I'm explaining, and we'll be taking a lecture on these things separately on each and every topic later. Now the second question is, what is the purpose of journaling and why we use journaling concept in DB2? Now what is journaling? So journaling basically when we perform any operation on a database file. For example, we change a record, we inserted a record, we deleted a record, right? So whenever we are doing something, so we are changing the record, we are changing the database actually. So whenever the record database changes, so whenever the database changes, so it will record those changes into the using the journaling feature. So we can record, or we can save those operations, or those um, changes which happen on a particular database file using the journaling feature in IBM AS400 system. Now there are two objects basically. We must create two objects: journal uh, receiver and journal object. So journal receiver is of type star JRN RCV, and journal is of type star JRN. Now, first thing is we create a journal receiver, then we create a journal object, and we attach that receiver to that particular journal, right? So journal records actually basically writes the journal entries. So there were some journal entries which will be written to the journal receiver using the journal. So at particular instance of times, the journals objects got created, so that having the images, so we can have the before after both images always for a journal based on the settings which we just want to record for that database file. So journal and journal receiver objects are basically the main things in the journaling concept. Now these journal receiver are basically used to perform the commits. So whenever we think of that everything is fine, we can just perform the commit operation. So we can, using the journal receiver, we basically perform the commits or rollback also. So we can roll back the database changes as well using these journal receivers journal. So basically what happens, just uh, commit or uh, commit, or you can say rollback. Now I'm talking about support forward and backward recovery. Means, for example, you have a previous table and you made some changes on the journal, right? So some changes were recorded on the journal, so you can make those changes to the database file, previous state of that database file, and make the forward support. Means whatever changes which were made, you can just add them to the previous file and make a forward support. And the backward support is like, for example, you have did something like you have added some particular number of records, and you don't want those records, they are obsolete records, they were added by mistake. So you just want the backward recovery in that case. So you will be using those journal receivers to uh, remove those changes from the current file and restore that to the previous state using the journal receiver objects. So this is called the forward and backward recovery. So you can support the forward and backward recovery whenever your files are only journaled. Now there is one more concept there. So we have a few options, like we can create a library, like using create lib command, and we can create a schema using create a schema statement in STR or in embedded SQL. So these are the two things, but they actually differ. Schema is also a library, and library create lib is also a library. But in a schema, whenever you are creating a schema, that schema will by default creates a journal and journal receiver in that schema, which is QSQJRN journal. Okay, but in library you don't have the default journal receiver. You have to create a journal, you have to create a journal receiver, then you can perform the journal functions. There were some journal functions you can perform on the tables created inside that library, and you can make those files journaling, or you can just enable the journaling on those files by creating some journal or journal receivers. So but in SQL schema you don't need to do this. It creates a journal and journal receiver objects in that schema, and by default whenever you create any file or table, that table or that file will automatically be journaled to the QSQGR. Table created inside a schema automatically journal to the journal inside a schema QSQJR. So this is a good functionality. So we can use the schema concept whenever we just want that we don't want to perform the journaling by myself, and that would be handled automatically. Then we can use schema. So user can stop the journaling as well. So they can done this using ngr and pf command. So but there's a concept of commitment control. We actually know that we can run our programs under the commitment control options. So whenever we are compiling a program, we have an option during compilation. So compile that is commitment control, whether we can set a star none or star yes, star change, like this one. So whenever we set this star none, we don't have to worry about commitment control then in that case. But whenever we are setting this as star yes, then in that case, if we stop journaling, then that would cause issue, because commitment control option would basically demand the journaling. So because we are going to commit the records into the database file permanently, so that wants that your database file must be journal, so that the uh, that rollback can be happened or commit can be happened. So these are the things. um, Now this is the command create grn receiver for creating a general receiver object, create grn for creating a general object, strgrnpf for start journaling a file. So we can start journaling on a particular file by using this strgrnpf command. Now this is the end of the second question. Now we are going with the third question: why we create join logical files in real time. Now we have pf, we create a pf physical file, we create the lf over that. And why we just require a logical file in real time scenario, and where we just create these things, uh, actually a join jlf. So suppose for example, we have two pf and we just want to read both the pf at once, and and we have a common id between common keys between them, and just we want all the data from this and this as well, both the tables. Then we need to read those pf, or suppose we have created a lf over that, then two lfs um, in our program, so which requires two read operation on a two different file. So why we gonna go with that? Even we have a functionality of JLF. We can create a joint logical file over 2PF or more than 2PF, and then we have a single JLF having a single record format. Then I have to perform a single read operation and I'll be getting all the data. So that will basically a good thing to go with. So that's why we are creating a joint logical files in the real time. So there we have two pf, and we are combining those pfs by using the keys using and creating a jlf joint logical file, two pfs, and which will make a jlf. So one read operation gets all the data. Now there are some restrictions as well in JLF. So before using the JLF, you must consider these things, that you cannot do something like cannot change a PF using JLF. So you cannot change your PFs using that JLF. You cannot use GFU to display the JLF. You you can specify one record format in JLF. That is obviously you can define a one record format only, but you would be able to join two or more than two files, physical files. So commitment control cannot be used on JLF. So whenever you are using the commitment control option, so you don't go for this JLF options. So you need to think of something else. Now question 4 is why we have field reference file in our application. Field reference file. So what is field reference file? Field reference files are basically a PF. Now PF have data, but these field defense files don't have any data. So these field defense files always have only field definitions. So for example, we have a very big system and we have defined standards, uh, data types or lengths with some fields or some attributes with some modules, and I just want to make them only at one place. So for example, I just want to make or recall those attributes or data types or lengths for particular fields. For example, account number. For example, uh, just take an example of a bank, and we have a bank, and there is an account number of 16 digit. So I just want that the account number must be in sync everywhere. That should be 16 everywhere. So I just make that field in the file field difference file, and I defined it once only. That is 16P0 either, or either 16A. So it depends upon me, or a big int, or a big int. So it depends upon me. Now if I make or if I define that field in a field difference file where the definitions are stored only, no data is stored, then person who is gonna use that field account number in his table, then he just only have to refer that field. He don't have to declare the length or data type. He don't need to take care of those things, because that are already defined. So by chance he can, or he may make mistake uh, in using that field data type or length. He may define something else, so that would cause issue to the system. So we just don't want. So we want that a field difference file in our system, in a very big system. So always define the definitions of fields in the field difference file. So the files which are referring to that field difference file, which are the secondary file, you can say. So which are referring the fields from that field difference files, we'll just only have to recompile, right? So so no need to take care of the lengths or the data types, anything, just have to recompile those files. So field difference file, PF with no data, only field description. So we also call these tables or these field difference tables as data dictionary on a particular of a system. So they basically have the data and all the fields of a system, which are defined in a field difference file. Now DD, data dictionary. All definitions are present in one place, so which is a very good thing, that all the definitions are present at one place. So in case in future I just want to make that account number from 16 to 18, I have to only change at one place. That is the field reference file. So I just make 16 to 17, and then I have to recompile all those files which are associated with, or which are referring to that field, right? So that would uh, require less effort for change. Definition need to be defined once. So definition, so because it is stored at one place, present at one place in the file field different data dictionary table, so the definitions need to be defined at one place. And in other places, when we are going to use that field, we are just using the ref fld keyword to referring that field from that data dictionary table. So definitions need to be changed only at one place, that I already covered. So we can refer the field data dictionary referring to DD. So device files means just display files, printer files, database file can refer to the data dictionary table fields, but LF not. LF always be referring to the PF. So this is the thing which you must know. The ref FLD keyword used basically. So we can even we have a data dictionary table itself, and we can refer a one field to the another field in data dictionary as well. For example, there are three fields in the data dictionary: field 1, field 2, field 3. Field 1 is 10A, field 2 is 20A. And now I'm just defining the field 3 based on the field 1, which is also 10A. So I can use ref FLD field 3, ref FLD field 1 on the same file. But if in case this is on the other file, then I have to mention the file data dictionary file name as well, record format name as well. So these are the things. Now this was the why we have field difference table. We have field difference table file in our application. So I have explained the things here, why we have the field difference table in our application. Why we now the question fifth is why we get the level check errors in real-time applications. Explain few scenarios Now, before going to into the detail of this one, so we must know what is level check error actually. Level, what is level actually talked about here? So level is basically the format level identifier which is created at the time of creation of a PF. So whenever you are creating a PF using create PF command, then when you do DSP FD on that command and you will search for a record format level ID, you will get a record format level ID generated for that PF. So which is so that is the record format level ID which is talking, which is in we are referring here on level check. So for example, you have a PF1 and you have a program 1. Now you are using PF1 in the program 1, or this is the simple example. Then I'll take a complex example. So this is a simple example, PF1 and program 1. So for example, PF1 has a record format level identifier L1, right? Now I compile the program. So when I do DSPPG, when I check the record format level, I run the program. I'm not going into detail right now. I'm running the program, then it runs. There is no error at all. Then I did some changes on the PF and I just recompiled that PF, and now the record format becomes L2, and I didn't recompile the program. So whenever I run that program, I'll be getting the level check error. That is, your record format level ID is different from in the file with respect to the program. So whenever you compile a program and you have some file in case of RPG programs, right? Not in CLLE, in case of RPG programs only. So whenever you create a program, so in that at that time the files defined on your in your uh, you can say program, in your program, then the level check record format level of those files will be stored within the program itself. So um, for example, it was stored as L1. Now you have recompiled the file and make it L2. Now the program format level identifier for that file is stored as L1, and your file level format level ID is L2. So these are unmatched. So in case of unmatching, you will get an error of level check. So for example, just take an complex example. For example, you have 5 files in your program and you have just updated 2 of them. So the record format level ID of 2 files have been updated, and your program is throwing the level check errors. Now how you will track that error? How you will get to know that which files there, or you just ignore? We have some programs in the systems, in some systems, in the big systems, where we have to find more than 50 or 100 50 files. So at that time, how we will be getting that out of these 50, which files are getting recompiled, or the format level identifier of which files are changed? How can we check? So let's begin. So level check error, which is CPF 4131. So this is the ID for the level check error. So in this case, program attempts to access the file. So whenever you program calls, so at that time program attempts to access the file whose record format level is different from record format level when program was compiled. So this was the case. So this is the issue. That's why you are getting the level check error. Now solution is, one can think of now which one to adopt. So these are the solutions. Recompile the program. So the main solution is the recompiling of the program, which is throwing the error. But before recompiling the program, you must know that why, which files are actually causing those issues. Now the other option is set level check option is star no when creating a file. So whenever you are creating a file, you can set the level check option is star no. In that case, your record format level ID won't be checked at the time of calling that program, or whenever you are writing an override statement to a file, then you can specify the level check option as well. So this is the another solution where you can set the level check option as no. But think of one thing, that whenever you set the level check options no, you may yeah, in future you might get the data decimal error or something else, or some type of error which is actually you can say a fatal error, or which cause some issues to your system. So you cannot go for this option right now. So you must go for recompiling the program, but before that you have to check which files are actually in the programs, in the program having the record format id is changed. So how do you check that? What is the exact solution and how to approach? So there is a command dsp pgmref. So it will set the program reference dsp pgmref. So run command on the program. So for example, you have a program1, and you run the dsp pgmref command on that program1, then you will be seeing the list of files, whatever files defined on your program. You will see the list of those files in and the record format level id with those files associated with those files in the program. Just note down those and just check the record format level id of file separately using dspfd command, then match those two. If there is any difference, then recompile the program. So you can get all the files which were actually changed. Now because of that you are getting the uh, level checker, because every time if this thing happens, you must be asked that why this is happening, which file is actually causing this level check error. So if before recompiling the program, you must know that these two files or these three files or these 50 files in the program are changed and we didn't recompile our program, so that the record format level id which are now changed for the pf for the files which are defined in our program must be updated with the program also. Whenever you recompile the program, the updated record format id will be saved to the within the program for those files, and now when you run the program you won't get the level checker. So run command on the program, check files record format within program, match with actual file record format using dspfd command, and this was dsp pgmref command. Unmatch if the record format level id is unmatched, then recompile the program. So this is the end of the PPT. Thank you. Um, I think the 5 questions are very much interesting, and the explanations is also. So I think you like this video. Thank you and have a nice time.